So good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar session where we're going to take a look at some surfacing capabilities within Creo. We're going to take a look at two aspects. One capability is within Creo as the base license with Freestyle, and the other is the interactive surface design extension. And leading the demo and the presentation today is Paul Dye. He is a solutions consultant and applications engineer with PTC's Virtual Center of Excellence. If you've been on a webinar at any time with us, most likely it was Paul that was doing the demonstration and the overview. He does a great job. So we're looking forward to learning more about this today. And one of the things, and this is kind of reaching back a bit, but when PTC changed the name back in 2011 from Pro Engineer to Creo, Creo is a Latin word that means to create. And the reason that they changed the name was because they had written the code from the Co-Create direct modeling software that Hewlett-Packard had invented, but PTC purchased from Hewlett-Packard sometime around 2008. And what PTC did was they incorporated that direct modeling kernel from Co-Create onto the Granite kernel, which allows you to have this freestyle capability of being able to take a primitive shape and create these complex surfaces and ideas while in a parametric setting, but not having to add the parametric intelligence up front. So it allows you to create things a lot quicker. So that's the reason why things like Freestyle and the flexible modeling extension exist in the base license of Creo. So without further ado, Paul, you have the con. Take it away, my friend.
All right, perfect. So thank you, Rob, for having me on. I'm happy to go through and talk a little bit about how we handle surfacing from the aspect of Creo. There's definitely a bit that goes into it in terms of what you actually might need out of a surfacing tool, right? It depends on the use case that you're working with, whether you want to focus on speed, accuracy, having parametric control. It's a lot of different aspects that go into it. So we have a couple of different tools that really help you out in different manners, right? So I'm going to go through and explain a little bit into it. I can show a couple of examples of what it looks like to work in these different tools. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to pop those in the question and answer box in the chat. I can really go through and answer anything that you have around that. If there's anything that I can't answer, I'll obviously reach back out into my field resources and get anything pretty much answered for you as well. So happy to go through and explain a little bit into this because there's definitely some challenges that you have whenever it comes to anything surfacing related. And normally, if you think about surfacing, it's something that normally requires a pretty high degree of skill and expertise to be able to do effectively. Normally requires users to have an in-depth knowledge of how to build out first and foremost complex curves, right? A lot of times curves tend to be the base for what you're doing from a surfacing perspective. Everything that you need to get to high quality surfaces, and that can be a big challenge. And what we've seen users really struggle with is really creating this type of surfaces and geometry with your standard parametric surfacing techniques, because things like parameters and constraints that you have to go through and lay out really limits the amount of flexibility or creativity that you have in the process. A lot of companies that end up relying on third-party applications to do things like conceptual design, exploring new ideas. A lot of times that's what you need to be able to do. You need to be able to create and evaluate more and more designs through that concept phase. A typical user might only be able to evaluate, say, 2 or 3 different designs during the concept phase, and where you probably want to have more, right? You want to go through and just spitball some things, try some things out, and not have to spend a lot of time going through and dimensioning everything. But at the same time, you have to be able to take into account styling, aesthetics, and for a lot of different products that you're working with, you need a design that's going to appeal to a customer. Right? So it's a lot of things that you have to go through and take into account. And there's a couple of main tools that we have in Creo for being able to work into these challenges. So one thing that I want to talk to before I talk to the interactive surface design extension is almost where it falls in the process. So one of the main ones that we have here is first and foremost just some standard capabilities that we have in Creo Parametric for what we call freestyle design. This is for freeform modeling that we're working with in the process, where we want to take essentially the focus away from doing things from a parametric perspective and laying out a lot of constraints and parameters, and more so just say, hey, I want to get to an intended shape. I'm just going to push and pull on this to get to that, almost like shaping with a ball of clay, right? This is commonly referred to as subdivisional modeling, where you're putting these different nodes and edges on the faces of the model, and you're pulling and pushing on that mesh, and it's all just going to be one feature. It's just going to be one Freestyle part. And what you'll do is you'll start off with a primitive shape, say a square, sphere, cylinder, and then you start moving the model around. You're pushing and pulling on the different faces and the edges until you get it looking the way that you want. So you're not really going through and laying things out parametrically or focused on numbers and constraints or anything like that. More of just, hey, I want to see what the shape is, rather than having to define and dimension every single piece of this. And it's really ideal for, first and foremost, your industrial designers, but also surfacing novices, because maybe you're a great CAD designer, but not necessarily a surfacing expert. Well, you don't necessarily have to be. You can go through and still get a lot of those great capabilities. And everything that you're building out is still going to be what we would call production quality, or curvature continuous. It means that Creo is not going to build out something that wouldn't be able to be manufactured. You're still going to be able to get to standalone manufacturable parts that you don't have to send off to someone else to go through and fix it up or anything. It's going to be ready to go. So this is really the one side of it where you want to focus on specifically just the aesthetics, the shape. Don't have to go through and dimension everything. But in a lot of cases, you probably do want to have more of that control, but you don't want to give up that level of, I'll say, freedom that you have to go through and focus on design and aesthetics and things of that nature. So that's really where tools like the interactive surface design extension come into play, right? So this is taking a lot of the benefits that you have from something like Freestyle, where you can go through and really have a lot of control and flexibility throughout the design process, but at the same time, still give you more of a technical surfacing core to it in the engine, where you can still go through and lay those things out, but still give you a lot of the flexibility that you might want. And the idea with it is we want to still focus on aesthetics, shapes, rather than having it to the entire time focus on constraints and parameters that you might have to do with your standard type of parametric modeling. So the idea here is that we're maximizing efficiency. It's everything that we go and put into this tool is trying to make you more productive throughout that surfacing process. As you'll see in the demo, it has a very intuitive user interface. You're going to be working a lot of times in a 4-window display that helps you to build out features from multiple different angles at the same time. And that's really what you need to do a lot of times when you're working with more complex geometry. If you're working in the X direction, the Y, the Z, we're going to make it easy to make changes from any of those perspectives, and then still get context in from the other perspectives as well as you're making changes. Now, a lot of times whenever you're working in surfacing, you're going to be starting with curves, right? Freeform curves. ISDX, or interactive surface design extension, makes curve creation very straightforward. We have a lot of enhanced capabilities for building out different types of curves, isoline curves, curves on surface, curves from surface, projection onto another surface, a lot of different ways that we're going to give you to get those curves built out. And then also analyzing the curves to make sure that they're tangent, curvature, or acceleration continuous. Whenever you're building out high quality surfaces, the quality of the curves that you're starting with are going to be just as important. So we want to have a lot of control in that process as well. And then from that point, we made the creation and editing of the surfaces very flexible and interactive. A lot of different types there as well, from boundary, loft, blend surfaces, smart curve, and surface connections. Just making sure that everything that we build out is going to transition how we need to, really getting to those high quality surfaces using that. And one of the biggest things that we want users to be able to do is create this sort of freeform geometry at any point in the design. And we're able to do that because it's still tied in with our standard Creo Parametric features. That means that any changes that we make to our surfaces, they're going to update real time any of the design or analysis features that you built from them, and vice versa. If you built something in ISDX, or the interactive surface design extension, that was defined from your parametric features, everything can be still fully associative. All your surfaces and curves can update real time. And you're able to work from either 2D or 3D imported geometry. A lot of times we see users working in the concept design phase, starting from a few sketches. So you can bring those in and use those as the base for the design. Or you could also work directly from, say, a 3D point cloud or facet geometry. It makes it also easy to reverse engineer curves or surfaces. And one of the big questions is, who is the interactive surface design extension designed for? And really the first big group is going to be your conceptual and industrial engineers, anyone that's working more so in the industrial early stage design process, really laying the foundation for a model. But it's also for really anyone that's working in Creo. So you have your everyday engineer, designer. If you need a clean cosmetic shape on the outside of the model, it's really what ISDX is very powerful for working into as well. What I'm going to do now is walk through a demonstration I want to go through first and foremost and just give you a quick look at how the Freestyle tool works. So just what it looks like to go through and do a little bit more of that freeform modeling. And then I'll switch over and show from the interactive surface design extension how we start to include more of that into what we do from a parametric standpoint and start to get more control over that process. And really from there, work into getting very high quality surfaces beyond that, but still at the same time, giving you the level of flexibility that you might want in that as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into a quick look at what Freestyle would look like. And this is going to be for a swing arm of a motorcycle. And as we do for a lot of different concept designs, I'm going to start with a picture or a drawing. This might be something that one of my designers sent me. It's a sketch of what they want the swing arm to look like. So I'll go ahead and pull that up here. And what I'll do is bring in this 2D image into my 3D environment. This will be a trace sketch that we'll begin to build around. Again, I can place that in. I'll move it over top of the hub, just wherever I want that to be located. And with this, you can move it around. You can scale it up or down, wherever you might need to in that case here, just to get it situated where you want it. And once you have it where you need it to be located, you can set the transparency. And with this, you're good to go ahead and start to build into the process. So whenever you start into Freestyle, again, first thing that you'll go through and lay out is a primitive shape that you want to start from. So you can see that you have some different options here for either closed primitives, which are going to be more of a 3D type feature, or you could go through and also do this from just a flat 2D perspective as well. So I'm going to start with one of these closed primitives. I'll start with just a box that we can go through and work with. And as I'm going to go through and do this, a lot of what I'm going to be working off of is with quick menuing, right? So if I go through and right click on what I'm doing here in Freestyle, you're going to get this wheel essentially that you have all these different capabilities available to you, just right at the click of a mouse. So if you want to go through and change from the sides here, change the scale of what you're working with in that primitive, you can do that very quickly. And I'll really just start pushing on this until I start to see the shape that I'm looking for. And once I get this where I like it, I can start selecting on certain faces that I want to move around and just say, hey, I want to extend that. And then you just pull it out to wherever you need it to go. You can always add in nodes along the way just to further add to the level of control that you have with the Freestyle part. So it's very easy to add in more sections, to move certain pieces around, add increases. And what I'm going to do now is take this and maybe grab a certain vertex and just pull it out in a direction. If I want to go through and make sure that's going over into the middle, just quick menu, add in a new piece there, bring it towards the center. And even if I wanted to mirror that across, I could do that as well. It means that whenever I make changes to one side of the swing arm, the other one's going to update as well. So with that, I really only need to work with half of the design, and the system will automatically build out the other half for us. And I can see on the front end that I might need to round that edge off a little bit. So I can just simply click and drag this faces inwards. And what I'm really doing is looking at my part and just seeing how to best match up with the sketch. If there's anything that you want to try out or certain features that you want to see, I could just as easily do that. I can see very clearly, maybe in this profile, view exactly how well I'm matching up with that initial sketch that I was given, and then move the part around accordingly. So really starting to bridge the gap between what you would normally just build out on a notebook. You can actually just do that right from within your 3D Creo Parametric environment as well. And what I'm doing here is just adding a little bit of clearance. If I have a chain that needs to attach to this, I can move everything out just a little bit, grab certain sections on the side that you might need to refine a little bit more. And that's really one of the biggest things with Freestyle design is we want to make it very quick, just move things around, try things out, just pull and push on the vertex of the face to see what it's going to look like. You don't really want to have to spend a lot of time thinking over every single decision you're making. If you want something to be a little bit thicker, you just make it thicker. If you need it to move a little bit, you just move it. So if I see a decision that I made along the way has altered my design in any way that I didn't intend, you can just simply go back and refine it if you'd like to. You can always really work with this or increase or decrease the number of facets that you have in any given area. So you still have full control in that regard. Maybe along the sides here, I want to add in a bit of a stiffening area. We can just take that, pull it out or push it in along the edge. And same thing with before. I can decide if it's extruding out too far, I can push it in. I can add in some hard edges, soft edges. Really the key here is that all the geometry that we've been building out here is at the end of the day still going to be fully manufacturable. It's all going to be curvature continuous surfaces, all things that could be machines look the way that I want. And once you're done working with it, I can go ahead and accept it and then take that surface and then solidify it. And then from that point, you have a fully functional Freestyle part. And it's just a solid piece. So if you were to bring in any cuts or bosses or work with it from that point, it's just going to be the same standard type of features that you'd work with from a normal Creo Parametric standpoint. So just go ahead and do what you'd normally do in that sense, add in some rounds or chamfers, and you're good to go working with it. So really that's the idea with this tool is be productive, do things quickly, and still get to differing levels of geometry, but do it in a way that requires a lot less inputs, a lot less control that would normally limit you in terms of getting to these types of surfaces that quickly. So just a quick look there into what we had to do from a freestyle perspective. Again, really what we would call freeform modeling. But if you have any questions on that, feel free to drop it in. But I kind of want to go through and start to add in a little bit more control that I have in the process, but at the same time, keep that level of efficiency. Well, that's where we return to the interactive surface design extension. So let me go ahead and switch over to this very quickly. And we can go ahead and dive into a quick look at what we're working with there as well. All right. Go ahead and share my screen back up here. And we can go ahead and get started. All right.
Getting there.
Yep. There we go. Let me know whenever you can see my screen again, Rob.
Yes, I can see it.
Awesome. So yeah, this is a model I'm going to be working with here, and it's going to be starting from a similar type of process. We have just a sketch or something that we pulled in from the industrial designers. Same type of process as we did with the freestyle part. Just going to use that as the base for what we're going to be working with here. And I also have this metal bar on the outside here. So this is going to be some hard geometry that I want to design around. And what you can see is I actually have a curve that's defining where that metal bar would be located. So if I don't want to work around it, or if I just want to hide it in the meantime, I still have a curve that's laying out where that would be located. So I can just keep that hidden for now. And if you want to go through and work with the interactive surface design extension, it's going to be similar to where we found the freestyle tool. It's just going to be available right here from within the style feature. So anything that we're going to be working with here inside of ISDX is going to be within this style feature. So go ahead and start into this and build out some, first and foremost, curves on the model. Again, curves are really the foundation for the different surfaces that we're going to be building out in this tool. And as you can see, it's going to be very easy to go through and build out on the model. You can just lay it out very loosely and then define that better as you go along. And at any point while you're doing this, you can do curvature analysis, where you can see how smooth the curves that you're building out are, especially at any points where you might have transitions between curves. You can really start to smooth those out as well. And maybe I need to align this a little bit better with the sketches I had from before. So what I can do is actually work in a multi-view approach, allows us to see every change that I'm making from multiple different orientations at once. So we can change the size of each of those views and really focus in on maybe one that we're designing with, but then get context into the other views that you're making changes to as well. So it's very important when you're working in 3D space, as you're going through and moving a curve in one direction, well, what's that doing in the Y or the Z? So it makes it a lot easier to see that throughout the process. So we can go through on each of these views, just really make sure that the curve is aligning well with those 2D sketches that I started with. You can add in some points as you see fit. And once you have that laid out, we'll do the same sort of thing down here at the bottom. And what you'll notice is you can really lay out the curves as precisely or as loosely as you'd like to. But from that point going forward, you can start to define that level of detail as you move along, as you start to have a better understanding of what you want it to do. And even have that curvature analysis available at any point, or if you'd like to, just switch right back into that multi-view, get some better context. And while we're in the edit curve, you can always go back in and add more points in very quickly. And while we're moving the points around, you can always look at the curvature plot just to make sure that each change that we're making is actually doing it what we want it to do. And if it's not, just go back into any of those views, make whatever changes that you might need to, but you're much less likely to have any issues pop up unexpectedly later on. So you have a full understanding of the different changes that we're making here. All right, so let's go ahead and activate the right plane here. And we're going to create our first planar curve on it using a couple different reference points from the curves that we already have created. So it just starts by selecting on the curve that we have up at the top here to lay this out. And then we'll move that down to the center and then finish that down in the bottom. And once we have that one good to go, we'll place a few more along here. Maybe this time we'll use the radial planar option. This means that I'll select on a point on one of these curves, and the plane that's being created will be normal to the profile sketch that we selected. Just making sure that it's intersecting with the other curves as well. And if you'd like to, you can use the curve edit option to move that plane at any point normal along that curve as well. And then we'll do the same sort of thing with a third curve. Again, using that radial planar option. Let's go ahead and just place this over on the right-hand side. All right, so it's looking pretty good for all the curves that we wanted to lay out. We can go ahead and take that and create a first surface off of those. We can do that by first selecting on the curves that go right along the boundary of that surface. Then we can select on the controlling curves that we have in the middle there as well. All right, and just like that, we're good with our front surface. We're good to go, keep moving along to some of the top sections and the bottom as well. Now, the first thing that I'll need to do is add in a couple of 3D free curves here along some of our existing curves. It's just going to make sure that the surfaces that we're adding in here up at the top are going to transition well into the surfaces that we already built out. And with these ones here, we'll go ahead and select on the 4 bounding curves along the outside region that we want to place that curve in. So that's looking pretty good. We'll go ahead and do the same thing over here on the right-hand side of the model. That's looking good as well. So with that done, we can go ahead and focus on the middle section. And it's going to be similar to the very first surface that we created. So first thing I'll do is add in a controlling curve here in the middle of that region where we're going to place that surface. The main difference now is that I want to be able to control the tangency of both sides. So you can see here that we have different options whenever it comes to controlling it. Make it either tangent, curvature, or acceleration continuous at each of those points. So we have a lot of control that we can say at each of those ends of the curves that we're building out. Right. That's looking good. Again, we can always go back into that multi-view as well if we need to get a little bit more context into what we're building out here. And we can add in a couple points just to give us a bit more control over that curve. And then down here at the bottom, just making sure that everything's positioned correctly. There we go. I think that's looking good. We can go ahead and move forward here and create these middle surfaces. We'll first start by getting the smaller half here using the bounding curves along the outside. That one should be good. Just make sure that it's tangent in the way that we like. Right now with this larger section, I maybe at this point say, hey, I actually need this to be indented in a bit. So we can just from any point along the way as well, add in one more controlling curve along this. Let's go ahead and work with that. Make sure that it's also going to be surface tangent as well. And we'll just pull that curve in a bit. And with that, we're good to go ahead and create a last surface up at the top here. And while you're defining that, you can define the transition into the surfaces at any point as well. Just add in that controlling curve that we have in the middle. And we're all good to go up at the top. And pull in that controlling curve. There we go. All right, so now I'll go down to the bottom and kind of repeat the processes so you can see a little bit more into what we're doing there. We'll add in the first curve that we have over on the left-hand side. Do the same thing over here on the right. And with those in, we can go ahead and place our 2 surfaces on either side. So what we're doing here is just creating 4-sided surfaces, but you could do more than just 4 sides if you wanted to. You could just as easily build out lofted surfaces, swept surfaces, really a lot of options that you have at your disposal at any point while you're working. It's whatever gives you, the designer, the best way of getting there. So I'm going to come down here and finish up the center section. And again, the quick menuing for defining the tangency and the curvature while you're working is meant to be very fast. One of the main points throughout the different tools that you have in ISDX, whether it be for the multi-section view, the quick menuing, we have a lot of different capabilities here in ISDX that allow you to build out some fairly complex geometry, but still do it in a way that takes less mouse clicks, less hassle about having to build things out, and still having a lot of control in that process. So here, just making sure, again, that our center curve is aligning well with that initial sketch that we started with. And that's looking good. We can go ahead and fill in that first area down here at the bottom with the new surface once we have this all laid out. And again, you don't necessarily have to always match up exactly with what you have in the sketches. You can just use that as reference and then go through and work off of that as well if you'd like to. And this will work similar to how we did with the other 2 surfaces that we had by selecting on the 4 curves along the outside. And again, just making sure that our tangency is good in each of the directions there. And then last thing we'll do is fill in this top section here and have that end area indented a little bit like we had up at the top. Let's go ahead and get that added in here. And this will really be the last surface that we want to add in at this point. Once we have that all filled in, we'll just go ahead and get that indented and add it in just the same as we did up at the top as well. Alrighty. It's looking pretty good. And we're good to go. Go ahead and just make sure that we're good on all those edges, add in our controlling curve, and move forward from there. So now we have our surfaces all built out. You can do some reflection analysis inside of ISDX as well. See exactly how well things are transitioning. You can use these zebra stripes here to see the different reflective properties of the surfaces. Just give you some insight onto the quality of the surfaces. See if there's any issues with any of the surfaces you built out. And with that, I really have the base for my design. I don't really need to be working with those images that we started with. So we can go back into our view manager here and hide those images for both the front view here and top. Right. And right now the surfaces that we built out are all separate surfaces within that one style feature. So what I'll do now is merge those surfaces together into what we call quilts. If you haven't worked with quilts, they're essentially just going to be a grouping of one or more different surfaces. And once you have them together, you can see that we have a little bit of extra material that's going to overlap some of the hard geometry that we have in the model. So we can go through here and do an extruded cut to remove anything that might exist in those other areas. And with that, we now have essentially everything laid out where we want. We can go ahead and start to round off some of these harder transitions. And that's just going to be using our normal standard type of rounding capabilities. Again, very powerful from within Creo. And now from this point, what I want to do is remove the area where the handguard is going to attach back in with the metal support bar. I have a surface laid out that defines that slot where the bar needs to be located. So we'll just use our merge tool to essentially subtract out that slot area from the new surface. There's also another area over here on the side where the cover is going to attach back in with the rest of the assembly. So we can remove the material from that section as well. And then same as before, we can use some smooths or some rounds to smooth out the hard edges that we have in some of these surfaces. Rounding is very robust from within Creo. Maybe we want to do a quarter round around the outside edge of the front surface. And then for this inner edge, we'll just go ahead and keep that at a constant radius. All right, now everything's laid out how we like. We can go ahead and give this a thickness to that quilt, which in turn is going to turn this into a solid model. And there we go. We have our model that we can go ahead and take forward, work around. And what's powerful from this point as well is that full associativity that we have from our surfaces to the rest of our parametric features. So it means that if any of the hard geometry that we use to define that surface changed, maybe the inner radius of our curve here needs to be worked with, you need to increase or decrease that a little bit. You can go ahead and just make some changes that we have. And right along with that, everything's going to update, right? The surfaces update, all your different features update. Everything that we created in ISDX is going to seamlessly be connected in with anything else that we can do from Creo going forward from there. All right, so that is the interactive surface design extension. So build out some surface geometry very quickly and have full control throughout that process as well.
Excellent, Paul. Thank you very much. Appreciate the in-depth overview. Is there anything else you want to cover at the end?
No, it really covers most of what I wanted to talk to. Again, just really wanted to reiterate the fact that ISDX really falls in between in that area of making sure that you have that flexibility and freeform control that you have from something like Freestyle, but giving you the control that you would really have from a normal parametric style surfacing tool.
Okay, great. So I want to thank everybody for being on the webinar today. Paul, thank you very much for leading us, giving us a great demo, showing us ISDX as well as the Freestyle extension. And keep an eye out because next week we're going to take a look at Creo's reverse engineering extension. So thanks everyone for being on. If you have any questions or want to see a more detailed demonstration, just reply to the email that came out to you that's invited you to this webinar. Those replies will come directly to me. and we can set up a custom demo for you. So hopefully we'll see you next week on the reverse engineering extension webinar. And I'll get this posted to our YouTube page today or tomorrow and send the recording out to everyone. Thanks again for being on, and have a great afternoon. Take care.